Hi there, and welcome to the almost 2023 edition of First Look. You're getting formal, Ben, today because I presided over a funeral and it was outside and I needed something a little bit warm, and I have a session meeting in like an hour and a half, so I had I had to do this kind of in between. But I will devote every single second to being focused on you, my friends. Um, Thanks for being you. This is that interesting week in between Christmas and New Year's, and now we're into the Christmas season. And it's been Advent this whole time, and it's always, of course, a hilarious thing for people who work in the church, because what we're advocating for is like, hey, it's Advent, right? This whole season we're getting ready for Christmas. We're doing all the things. We made you do the purple bows and all that kind of stuff. But now it's Christmas, and now for the next, these days between here and Epiphany, this is the Christmas season. And what's hilarious about that is that by now you're sick of Christmas. You're just sick of it, and I understand. But I'm going to help you hopefully be a little bit less sick of it. And because I'm recording this in the late afternoon, today is brought to you by sparkling water instead of coffee, because even I have to, you know what I mean? All right. So we've been doing this whole series on the idea of digging in deeper into the world of Jesus, right? The world that he lived in. What was he incarnate into, right? And I try to give you this nugget, this interesting kind of perspective on the birth story and the inn, and what did that mean, and I did my research and that kind of thing. And here's what's interesting and funny and affirming about that message, is that some of you were able to join us for a wonderful Christmas Day service at Wexford Community Pres. And there were a lot of Presbyterians in one room, from a lot of different places. So you had Northmont and Highland and Wexford, and then you also had Heritage and some Glenshaw people, because my wife got a chance to be there because they didn't have a service at their church, and so they unofficially joined us. And so we had it was like a presbytery meeting. It was really a worship service broke out at a presbytery meeting, and it was really, really nice. I bring that up because Tyler Domsey, who's the pastor at Wexford, made almost word for word the exact same point that I made the day before. And so again, it's just funny that clearly, he went to Westminster College too, and so he has the same source materials like Ken Bailey as I do. But that he made that point this year of all years. We made them back-to-back days. Some of the folks who were there got to hear it twice. But it also was like, okay, I'm not reading this wrong. This is what it is. And it's that invitational piece that kind of speaks into the world that accepted Jesus. And that's the part that I really wanted to kind of drive home on Christmas Eve, which he also did on Christmas Day, which was those who accepted Christ have to be the people that we accept. And so you see, this sort of humble beginning with shepherds. The shepherds, his point was, if the shepherds thought they were in danger, they'd have taken them home and been like, you're in a barn, like we're gonna take you back to our house. Like, this is ridiculous. But they were clearly comfortable because they left saying, hey, we saw this wonderful thing. They didn't leave seeing Jesus and go, you won't believe where he was born. It's terrible. This is bad. So we need to help them out. These kids are clearly over their heads. It's not what happened. So go back and look at the service if you can. But we had a wonderful time. So now we're in the season of Christmas, and we're almost to Epiphany, but not yet. And the service that we're having on New Year's Day is about new beginnings, and so a lot of it will be focused on that. And that's, of course, what the birth of Jesus allows us. But, it's also the new year. Is that arbitrary? Yes. Do we count years differently than they did at the time? Yes. I get all that. But for you and I, it's, a moment where we try to pause and look to see what might be different moving forward. And I've been doing a lot of that myself, just in my own personal journey. And, so as I turn the page in this new year, I'm looking forward to, to something that I hope to grow into. But we'll see how that works out. You all probably get a chance to hold me accountable to that, so that's fun. So our passage for today is Isaiah 60. So it comes at the end almost at the end of Isaiah. And by now, we've seen a lot of Isaiah, right? Which again, we always do around this time of year because of its look at salvation and its look at the reconciling of people to the land. So that kind of that image of Messiah comes up so often in this book, and because it's so much hardship and so much endurance and so much promise that you see, it's hard not to see Jesus in the book. So this is a passage that goes along with the Epiphany passages, which we'll also see on the 8th. And so the next couple of weeks between here and there, you're going to hear a lot about Epiphany. And then you're going to have a concert about it on the 8th in the afternoon. So you get a lot of wonderful stuff in this season. So let me just read this passage to you and start to kind of get our mind around it. So again, you're going to read this passage and listen to it and think about it in the context of not only newness, a new year's and new beginnings and a world made new in light of Jesus, but also with the knowledge and acceptance of who Christ is. That's Epiphany is a lot about that. Is about the putting the pieces together in the acknowledgement of this one who is born and who it is and what does it mean for me, and putting something together that would change everything. And that's a big part of what we're talking about, is that change, newness, and the light that we now, not only has it come into the world, but now it starts to be acknowledged and recognized, and something happens because of it. Okay, so let me go ahead and get myself together here. All right, so here we are. Isaiah 60, 1 through 7. The subtitle, by the way, before I just about start reading, says, "The Ingathering of the Dispersed," which I think is a really subtle way of saying those who were ripped from their homes, and we're going to gather them together and try to reestablish a sense of identity and self-worth. "Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples, but the Lord will rise upon you, and his glory will appear over you. Nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. Lift up your eyes and look around. They all gather together, they come to you. Your sons shall come from far away, and your daughters shall be carried on their nurses' arms. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and rejoice, because the abundance of the sea shall be brought to you. The wealth of the nations shall come to you. A multitude of camels shall cover you, the young camels of Midian and Ephah. all those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and frankincense, and they shall proclaim the praise of the Lord. All the flocks of Kedar shall be gathered to you. The rams of Nebaioth shall minister to you. They shall be acceptable on my altar, and I will glorify my glorious house. Through verse 7. Again, it's not a hard thing for us to be able to see, especially in retrospect. They're talking about Jesus. They're talking about the Magi. And this is the promise. This is the prophecy that people were putting together. This is why they brought what they did. And one of the things I think I'd like to really dig into a little bit is, if you look into this passage, into verse 6, for instance, where it says, "They shall bring gold and frankincense and shall proclaim the praise of the Lord." Why, in this context, is this what they are bringing? And that's I think the interesting comparison that I'd really like to dig into a little bit, which is, when the promises were there and the prophecy was there, you and I can look at that from the Jesus perspective. But those who were reading this originally would have not looked at it necessarily from that perspective, but from some other perspective. And the closest I can get to is that these, all of these things, these gifts, these are big, expensive, honoring, fragrant gifts. The flocks and the gold and frankincense. These are things of luxury and importance, and they all represent something that would have been perceived as completely lost, never to be had again. And I think that we can't make that small. We talk about the world that Jesus came into, right? Arrived in. And you have this world where, first of all, this happened. The exile would have been the tearing away of a people from something that God had promised. God said we would be here forever, and now we're not, and we should assume that everything that we ever thought is gone. Every promise, everything has been either taken from us or we gave away because we didn't know what to do with it. And just read Lamentations once, and you'll kind of get a feeling of that. The anger and ache and remorse. It's like hell. It's like the people who are being taken to hell, never to return. That's the more I read it, the more I try to feel it. That's exactly the way that And so out of hopelessness comes something that they didn't think would be there. And this passage really speaks to that. So they get back from exile, and they start to rebuild. And it takes a long time. It takes, for things to get rebuilt in the ways that we think they get rebuilt, the temple and that kind of thing, it takes generations. It doesn't just happen over the course of 6 months. It takes years and years, lifetime, for that to happen. And prophets to come in and out of their lives. They started it, and then they paused, and then they got discouraged, and then there were those who opposed them, and then other prophets came, the minor prophets, which we'll talk about some other time, and they encouraged them again. Hey, you need to rebuild the city. You need to keep moving forward, because this dream that you've been given, it seems like you're letting it slip through your fingers again. And then they did rebuild it, and then it was broken again. You had revolts against other powers. In that time period between, if you look at the last prophets of the Old Testament and like Malachi, if you look at that time period to Jesus, there's this kind of, at least biblically, there's this sort of silent period where what was happening in that time period is that they were being taken over again by Greeks and by others, and now I'm missing some of them, and then of course eventually by the Romans. And in there you have the origin stories of Hanukkah. In terms of historically, that's my understanding, is that during those revolts against those powers is where we get the origins of Hanukkah. And so, that time period, even though we kind of blink and we're at Jesus, there's another 400 years or so of them struggling still, not to have what they thought that they should have. They were back in the promised land, but it was gone again. At least in terms of them possessing it and not being ruled by someone else. So you had Egypt, and then you had Assyria and Babylon and Persia, and then you're back, and then the Greeks and the Romans, and that's the world that Jesus comes into, and I think 400. Imagine what's happened in 400 years. 400 years ago we were coming over into onto this continent. Europeans were coming onto this continent, and all of what's happened since then is a heck of a lot. Well, that's the amount of time in between the rebuilding of Jerusalem and Jesus. And so you have this this kind of brokenness and worn down kind of feeling, and Jesus lives into that moment, and still, even after the death of Jesus, you have the temple falls again. The Romans destroy it, and it's an over and over again process. And that's the part for me, I think, that is amazing when I think about what does it mean for the light to break through, because that's not the end of the movie. It feels like it could be the end of the movie, but we know that it's not. We know that what happens is that the story keeps going. The people keep moving. Empires keep empiring. That's just what happens, and history keeps unfolding. And so the light that we're talking about isn't this, at least in the here and now, at least in the world that you and I live in. It just keeps going, and what we see is the light of Jesus breaking into the world, and it's not like, well, now that it's here, everything is going to be 100% different, because of course it's not. Who we are, our salvation, our understanding of the world is completely different, but it's not like we just stop struggling. And I think that we need to claim that and understand it and live into that. And I think when I see this passage here for today, it's an arbitrary moment in time. Just like January 1st is an arbitrary moment in time. The earth that we're spinning on, and the sun that we're spinning around, and the galaxy that's spinning around, the center of, the cluster of galaxies that we're a part of, none of that cares about January 1st. It's just a day we use as a marker, because we keep going. And, along the way, we find moments of light. And this is what Isaiah is really doing. You're going to be taken into exile. It's going to be awful. Who you are is going to be stripped down to its roots. But then you will be restored. But then something else will happen, and then something else will happen. And so it's about the light that we see woven throughout the story that really matters. It doesn't end with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. It doesn't end with Moses. It doesn't end with David. It doesn't end with Jesus even. It does ultimately, but not in the here and now. And that's the part that we hold on to, is that we just keep moving, but we take the light with us. And so wherever we pause is a good place to pause, but we still have more to do and more to come. And I think the other amazing thing about having the new year right before, kind of right next to Epiphany, is that there is a hopefulness in it. It's a moment to pause for hopefulness, because it's not like we have the joy that came with Jesus arriving, but then we have to figure out, what are we going to do with it? And the first thing that we do is hope, right? You make a decision to do something in your life, right? To pick up a new hobby, or to do something meaningful, or to deepen your relationships, or to separate yourselves from people that are harmful to you, or do something for your, like I said, your health or well-being, or whatever it happens to be. And there's that moment of joy when you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. This year's the year where I learn a second language. And then you start to think about and dream about why. Why am I doing this? Why am I going to change my health? Or why am I going to, take on a new skill? Or why am I going to, because I hope that I'll be better for it. I hope that I'll live longer. I hope that my life will have a better quality to it. I hope that those relationships that I build will involve me having a greater sense of fulfillment or love, right? There's a moment before you actually start walking, or start doing the thing, or take that first class, or make that first phone call, where you're just sort of, you've already made a decision to do it, and you haven't done it yet, but there's that one little sliver of a moment when you're just imagining the goal. You're just imagining the next thing. And that's a good moment. And you need that moment, because you need to refer back to it later, because things are going to get hard, right? You're going to return from exile, but eventually the Greeks are going to come, and the Romans are going to come. And you're going to need to be able to look back at that moment of hope and recognize that you can keep going. And that's a really important piece. And I think that's what you see this week and next, as we think about Epiphany, and we think about, going home by another way. We're choosing to do something new and something different and something else. And so, we're going to do that in this moment. At least that's the way I'm thinking about it right now. So as you think about, the new year for me, comes with a myriad of different memories, and but also an intentional hopefulness and optimism about what can be, and I'm really holding on to that this year, and I hope that that's true for you as well. So let's do that together. Let's see where it takes us. It's been an interesting ride, and now we're kind of looking at the world in after a year and a half of quarantine and pandemic and everything else, when we're now firmly trying to embrace the next thing, right? knowing that there's something else coming at some point. You know, who knows what it is, personally or globally, is something else coming. So what are we going to do then? Well, let's hold on to the light that we have now, and hopefully that will help guide us. So, Happy New Year. I'll see you on Sunday, January 1st, 2023. We'll have communion together. We'll pray together. We'll talk together. And it'll be good. And then we'll look forward to what's next. Thank you for being you. Thank you for a wonderful 2022. And I will see you next time on another First Look. Bye.